My ancestors, many of them came to Utah like this, across a desert, to get to a place where they would have liberty and property, and the ability to keep what they generated with their time and their knowledge and their sweat, and have choices like we talked about, right? And have those choices for their children. Well, in doing that, many of them came this way, and their daily ration of food was this. They got 8 ounces of flour. And they had that tied to their belt. And as they were coming across, pulling their hand carts, they noticed that some of the strongest of the men were dropping by the wayside, dead. And they were perplexed by this because they were losing these leaders and strong men in their companies. And as they went to investigate what was happening, they found that the men were taking their ration and scooping it into their children's pouch, so that they could make it to that valley, to liberty and property, and have the choices and govern themselves. Pilgrims, the same story. The Pilgrims, their journals, when they talked about getting to the New World, and if they could only just get to the New World and plant their faces in the mud so that their children could go over their backs to liberty. Comes out of their journals. Are we eating our children's seed corn right now? Is that who we are, really? Live for today, consume as much debt, consume as much of the future as we can. Is that who we are? That's not who we are. And so it really is just knowledge and courage in a republic that mobilizes our leaders. This is a prominent leader in Utah. Says, of course we may face ridicule, face fear, experience ridicule, and meet opposition. But let us have the courage to defy the consensus. The courage to stand for principle. Courage and not compromise brings the smiles of God's approval. A moral coward is one who's afraid to do what he thinks is right because others will disapprove or laugh. Remember that all men have their fears, but those who face their fears with dignity have courage as well. Martin Luther King put it this way. The soft-minded man always fears change. He feels security in the status quo and has an almost morbid fear of the new. For him, the greatest pain is the pain of a new idea. It's a new idea. As Thomas Hart Benton said, to battle for, not against anyone or anything. To battle for the only solution big enough to better fund education, better care for the environment, grow economies locally and nationally, attain some sense of energy independence. It's the only solution big enough. And if somebody has a bigger, better solution, please let me know. I'll go back home to my kids and go back to my nice little law practice, and and if there's something bigger and better, please. But we have the opportunity, and this is not, as we said, a Republican or Democrat issue. If we don't move forward and figure out how we're going to be pioneers of the future rather than prison guards of the past, it won't be because it's impossible or illegal or unconstitutional. It's just because we lack the knowledge or the courage, us and our leaders. So what can I do? It takes money to message forward. We're going as fast and as far as we can. The message is going far and wide. States east of Colorado are beginning to pass resolutions. They're beginning to stand up. In fact, I was in a meeting in Washington and presented just briefly on some of this. One of the prominent leaders in the Texas legislature came down and followed me out, and he says, how can I help you? This is our issue. With $150 trillion locked up, and when we're spending 10 to 15 billion a year to subsidize you from using your own resources to educate your own children and care for your own communities, this is our issue. And Eastern states are now advocating.
I use it.
Eastern states, excuse me, ma'am, we'll take questions when we're done. Eastern states are now advocating and mobilizing to work with us on this issue.
Is that ever going to happen?
She came to hear him. Let him speak.
Are you ever going to finish?
If you need to go, that's fine. We'll take questions later. But if you need to go, I can understand. This is certainly a big topic. People have accused us of sound bites and being cursory. No, this is a big issue. And in fact, you're getting a very small dose of what we talked about. There's so much more to this. But to know this, right? To know and share, to look at the knowledge and the courage. I will tell you that as we've got political races coming up in the next year, that's an opportunity, again, for people in a republic with knowledge and courage to conduct a job interview for those they want to choose to represent them. Why the difference? I would submit that that's a very valid job interview question. Why the difference when the promises are the same? And North Dakota has more access to govern themselves than we do in Montana. And the decisions for North Dakota are being made by people in North Dakota, and the decisions for Montana and Utah and others are being made by 532 people that don't live in Montana. And the results, as your governor said. Resolutions, we've got groups that are passing resolutions in support. School districts, we had in Utah, we had the Teachers Union, the School Districts Association, School Boards Association supporting this effort. Other groups like that. This is the South Carolina resolution supporting the transfer of public lands to the western states. Does it matter? The promises are the same. In your case even much more strongly than ours, it's the same document. Why the difference? It's already been done. They had the same complaints for decades. We can't educate our kids, grow our economy. It's already been done. Why the difference? It's the only solution big enough. Will we be pioneers of the future or prison guards of the past? And this is an amazing time. It's an amazing time with the issues we face going forward. We can simply ignore them, but that's not going to make the problems go away. In Utah, we face this issue that's so tremendous in how do we actually close those gaps, understanding that not only is it closing the gaps, we've got the undercurrent is being taken right out from under us because they're already cutting the funds, Title I funds in schools, the PIL payments, those are already going away. So let me just go past this, and if you're interested in more information, you can text that word LANDS to 58885. I want to leave you with a little quote. I like this quote that is kind of the epitome, I think, of where we're at. Ronald Reagan in 1987. It was the height of the Cold War, nuclear proliferation, the red phones and whatnot. He made this statement then. I think it's much more apt for today, regardless of who said it. But he said, "This is a wonderful time to be alive. We're lucky not to live in pale and timid times. We've been blessed with the opportunity to stand for something. For liberty and freedom and fairness, these are things we're fighting for, we're devoting our lives to. So let us go forth with good cheer and stout hearts, happy warriors, out to seize back our country and a world of freedom." Thank you very much. You've been very patient.
Thank you, Mr. Ivory. You seem to have, I'm no lawyer, but you seem to have made a slam dunk case. So I think we should just go ahead and just turn him on over. I much prefer to look like Louisiana. But then again, maybe you haven't made a slam dunk case. And I think you're a little remiss in not even talking about your own state's legal counsel that warned you not to pass this because it was unconstitutional. Likewise, Wyoming did. So if you seem ultra confident, and I know Susie Foss is likewise, I don't make much money, but I'll bet you $5 it ain't going to go anywhere. It's unconstitutional and won't pass. So
Well, if you have a,
$5 each one of you would.
if you have a better answer in how to close those gaps, I'm all for it. If you understand, excuse me, let me answer this question, ma'am.
Well, no, let me just.
Ma'am, let me answer this question.
It's a waste of time.
I understand.
Your state spent $3 million studying this and allocating money for a legal defense fund. We don't want to do that here in Montana.
And so let me give you some facts, okay? First of all, if you get 5 lawyers in the room, you'll get 10 opinions, right? We did not spend $3 million. We allocated $3 million to the Constitutional Defense Council, which deals with the RS-2477 roads issues, with the sage-grouse issues, with the shutdown of the national parks issues, with all of the various issues that we have to deal with on the federal issues pertaining to the public lands. A very small amount of that has gone so far into the study. We're going to allocate more and study this issue because we've got literally trillions at stake and we've got billions in our funding gaps.
Legal counsel.
Yeah, I'm getting to that right now. So if you understand what happens in a legislative session, we have a 45-day legislative session. It's 45 days no matter what. We're working probably 20 hours a day to work and move through. Our legislative council probably spent about a day on this issue. They looked at one case, the Gibson versus Chodo case. The Gibson versus Chodo case had to deal with land rights, not the transfer of public lands. If you read the Federalist Society analysis, they've gone through the Gibson versus Chodo case and the other cases and addressed that. And so I disagree with my legislative counsel. So,
Well, Wyoming, Utah.
excuse me, sir. Let's go on. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Okay, so I just have, this is the first time I've encountered with what your proposal is. And, you know, I have to say I was very pleased that you're not including national parks and monuments and such. But one of my questions is, so if this all of the other, I'm assuming this is national forests and BLM land gets switched over to state control, the only way I can figure that they're gonna get money off of this is if the resources are developed, like oil and gas and coal, or if the land is sold and then taxes are paid on it, because then you go from getting whatever, no, I'm not really good at statistics, but your little pill, your state, that SRS thing that's happening, isn't gonna be happening from the federal government, because the states now will have control of this. So what I'm looking at is, you know, you have your, I mean, you did give a really wonderful presentation, I have to, it was a little long, but the one slide where you're talking about, you know, we're gonna, this magnificent thing of, you know, preserving this earth for our children. What I see happening is a lot less control over those environmental issues. I mean, that's a real concern for me, that I don't want the state to take it over and then say, okay, Exxon, you can come in and drill now, and you're not going to be under all this stuff. How, and fire control, I don't see how the state is going to have the kind of resources and money and funding to handle the forest fires that we had at the federal government.
Yeah, let me take a few of those questions. Thank you. It is a huge issue. Our school institutional trust land manages about 3.5 million acres right now. They generate about $32 per acre positive net revenue. Leasing and mining and extraction, there's a whole variety of things. Grazing, there's a whole variety of things that they lease and do. In doing that, the model that this would be going for, as I explained earlier, federal public lands become state public lands. As we showed on other things, state public land generates just general public land, not school trust land. School trust land, their mandate is to maximize revenue, only maximize revenue. In a general public land setting, you've got the opportunity for multiple use. Not everything in Utah is a national park, right? I like the way Rob Bishop put it. I mean, there are some areas of Utah where an oil rig may improve the aesthetic value of the land. I mean, it's sagebrush, it's out in the middle of nowhere. You've got areas where you have resources that you have the ability to develop them on lease and royalty basis, just as is happening on federal lands now, except that on federal lands, the permitting process takes years and decades. On states, it doesn't take that long. States have been managing and permitting and regulating and the environmental quality of lands for decades and decades already. So, like your governor talked about on your forest situation, they put together a plan right here in Montana. You had all sorts of divergent groups coming together, working on a workable solution to a forest plan. They go back to Washington and said, we don't care about solutions.
Well, I think that's still are you talking about the forest jobs?
So, but the point being, in the states, you have the opportunity where you're being governed by people that have come right out of your neighborhood. You can get them on the phone, you talk to them and deal with them right now. I don't know how many of you have any control over the 532 people right now that are governing Montana and setting policy for your land in Montana. And as your governor mentioned, and it's happening all over the West, the environmental, excuse me ma'am, let me just, the environmental degradation that's happening right now is tremendous. So there are opportunities there. It's not going to be easy. This is why we're taking time to work all those things through and work through the issues with all of the groups and those concerns. But the environmental concerns are tremendous.
Sir?
Yes, sir.
I spent a big part of my life working for the public land agencies that manage our national forests, our wildlife areas here in Idaho and Montana. I then went to Washington for nearly 30 years and worked for conservation organizations. And in my long experience there, I learned one thing, that the people of this country value the public estate managed by the Bureau of Land Management, the Forest Service, the Wildlife Refuge System of the Fish and Wildlife Service, and the national parks. They hold it dear to their hearts. They claim ownership. Your proposal to turn those lands over to the states for disposal and sale to the private sector won't go over with the public. The public values their national forests, their massive grasslands administered by BLM, the wildlife ranges. They want them held in trust for the American people. In the final analysis, you must go to the Congress of the United States to turn those lands back to the states for the disposition to private ownership, which you're suggesting. The American people, in my experience, won't stand for that. They value these lands as a part of their ownership in the public estate. So I appreciate your lucid, fine presentation, but you're not serving the public interest of those who believe in this grand legacy. Each of us owns acres of our land.
Thank you for your comments. Let me just repeat this one more time. In the bill and in the proposal and in all the states that are looking at this, federal public lands become state public lands. There is no provision in the bill to sell the lands off. I mean, the kinds of inflammatory rhetoric that's out there. There's no provisions in the bill to sell the lands off to the highest bidder. What's that? Yes, there certainly is. And so that's exactly that's why we're still in the process. No lands have been transferred yet, right? So we're still in the process, excuse me ma'am, we're still in the process of developing those safeguards. That's why you measure twice and cut once. That's why these states have established study proposals to work out those very protections and safeguards, because these are, we've all grown in these lands as public lands. But sir, in terms of where you're going with this, what Lisa Murkowski said, the federal government's broke. And at some point you run out of runway of printing money. You know, if there were a way to pretend to print prosperity in perpetuity, it probably would have been figured out by now, but hundreds and hundreds of nations have tried and they've failed. And so we're going to have to deal with the reality of the fact that 42% of our revenue is going away, and the federal government is already cutting back money out of schools, they're already cutting back PILT, they're already cutting back SRS. And so that's part of the debate, and certainly the debate that you're talking about is going to go forward, and the point of this is, let's have a fact-based discussion. Does the federal government have authority? We know they don't have the money. We know the issues on the ground that your governor said are tremendous and they're urgent. And so it's simply a matter of going forward in that fact-based discussion.
We don't know where the money is.
You're not going to make 1.2 million acres.
Hey, let's have some civil discourse here.
Let me take one more question, and then I've got to get going to another part. Thank you for being here. Yes, sir.
Montana and North Dakota, state constitution, all up at the same time, they were almost mirror images. Am I correct?
Yes, the question is, were the Montana and North Dakota constitutions drawn up at the same time? The Enabling Act, which set forth what the terms in the Constitution would need to be, that was the same document. It wasn't just the same time, it was one document, one congressional act that set the terms for the constitutions and the admission for 4 different states, yes.
You've stated that now what we want to do is take federal public lands and make them state public lands, right?
Correct, yes.
I've worked in in North Dakota, and I've never seen not one energy check go to the state. It all went to private ownership.
Right, because in North Dakota,
How did that land-
excuse me,
How
let
did
me,
that land get to the public?
right, so in North Dakota, from their statehood in 1889, they did dispose of the land. If in Montana or in Utah, excuse me please, if in Montana or Utah in 1889 or in 1896, they had honored the same promise, the lands would have been disposed privately in most instances. That didn't happen, and so we're 100 years down the road and more down the road where we have relied on public access for hunting and fishing and grazing and mining and all of the rest. So at this point in the game, if we were in 1896, absolutely, sell off all the land. That was the deal back then. That's what they were working. We're not there.
What happened?
Excuse me, ma'am, let me finish, please. We're not there, right? We have developed this nature. Yes, I'm answering this gentleman's question, sir. The nature of where we are now is we are a public land people. That's going to continue. But now, how do we get there from here? We know the federal government is already cutting back the revenue right out of schools, right out of roads. I mean, we've got, just briefly, I was with Sheriff Gilbertson from, if you would like to leave, you're welcome to leave. I'm answering the gentleman's question. And you're welcome to go. I mean, thank you for being here. Sheriff Gilbertson in Josephine County, Oregon, right now has gone from 30 sheriffs to 2. Because the PIL payments are cut back, the Secure Rural Schools payments are cut back, the revenue from harvesting that was going into schools and public safety is cut back. He now has 2 sheriffs. NPR about 2 months ago ran a story that a woman called the sheriff's office and said, "Can you please send someone out?" He says, "We don't have anyone unless they're between 9 and 5. You're losing us. The woman said, "No, he's at my door right now. What do I do?" They have no sheriffs to go out and respond. I had commissioners in Idaho just last week saying, "We've got no money for roads next year because they're already cutting back the PIL and the SRS." So, I mean, these are real situations that are very challenging to deal with, and it's time for looking at how do we go forward in those situations. And you know, there really are no easy answers. So, I appreciate you being here. Thank you so very much for your time, and